Hey guys, welcome back to the Staff Meeting Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Mullins. George is actually on a hunting trip out in Africa right now. So he's living it up, living the dream. So I'm flying solo today, but really pumped up. We've got Coach John Heck on with us today. So, Coach, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, man, appreciate you having me on. And I like the name of the podcast, the Staff Meeting. That's a sharp name.
I appreciate it. It's one of those things, as George and I were talking about what to name the podcast, I was sitting there thinking about the learning and the development that I've had over my career. And I think some of those best conversations happened in a staff meeting. A lot of times when I was just sitting and listening to it. So I thought, what better name for a podcast, you know? So, but really, one of the primary reasons we wanted to have you on today was to pick your brain and talk a little bit about not only strength conditioning, but more so along the nutrition side. You're somebody that clearly has walked the walk from a playing career and coaching as well at a high level, but also continue to live that every day under the bar, which is something that I'm really big about. But you've definitely carved out like this niche for yourself in nutrition. So really, my first question is why nutrition rather than a focus on the strength conditioning side of things? Why the focus on?
Yeah, good question. My career roots really are in strength and conditioning, although I think my personal passion is equally, if not slightly more, in the nutrition side of things. And I kind of fell in love with training and nutrition around the same time. I started lifting weights in seventh grade and at the same time started looking into muscle milk and creatine and things like that. I'd, go to GNC like I was a kid in a candy store. And I really started getting an interest in both sides of the coin, training and nutrition. And over the years, that love continued to develop. And, I went on a career trajectory that was all primarily strength and conditioning based, although, I did kind of have a niche nutrition role in most of the places I was working. Like, for example, at Troy University, I was essentially functioning as the head nutritionist. We didn't have a quote unquote, nutritionist on staff. That was me.
Yeah, you got to be able to do it all right there.
Yeah, exactly. It was a little different going to, a Troy with a little bit less money than places like the Houston Texans, where they had, three full-time dietitians on staff. But I think I really figured out myself, for me personally, how powerful a tool nutrition was. Once my playing career ended, I immediately dieted down. I finished my career as an offensive tackle, weighing about 320, and I immediately dieted down to like 265. I wanted abs. Like, I'd been an offensive lineman for so many years. I had such a love for bodybuilding, powerlifting, strongman, all that stuff. That's where my passion was. And I was like, man, I've been training my ass off for a long time and I've gotten to scratch that itch, but I've never really gotten to apply nutrition the way I'd like to, because I've always had to, be an offensive lineman body weight. So I over dieted myself initially out of college. I would not execute a diet that way anymore. I lost a lot of muscle, lost a lot of strength, learned some lessons along the way, but it was just the first step in kind of, or the first domino that fell over that tipped over a lot of other dominoes for just further honing in diets as I went. And I realized that as I drastically improved my body composition, as I lost a ton of body fat, I was able to better grow muscle tissue. And as I was able to grow more muscle tissue and mitigate body fat, my strength took off in a lot of ways. And then I was looking better. My confidence was way up. I was talking to women differently. I was looking at myself differently. And I was so hooked. I fell in love with it. But also just really realized the power in terms of just pure performance enhancement that the nutrition had. So that was always something that I focused heavily on. And then I started running a side business when I was working in strength and conditioning. And my side business was primarily remote nutrition coaching. And, it's something that you're able to do at a pretty high level remotely. When it comes to training, you can send someone a great program, and I do training programming for people, but it's not quite the same as when you're with them on the floor and coaching them. But with nutrition, it's not quite like that. It's you're writing a good diet plan for them, and they've got to execute it. And you're finding ways to hold them accountable. But um, it was something I was able to do pretty successfully at a remote capacity while working full time in strength and conditioning, and started getting more clients and making a good side income from it. And then suddenly the side income was making me more money than my primary income was. Yeah, so I was like, okay, this is a legitimate plan B as a full-time thing. And I loved it. Like I loved the nutrition side of things. And eventually made the decision to step away from football and launch my coaching business full time. And I do primarily nutrition coaching, although I do work with a number of clients for their training as well. But yeah, really kind of niched hard into the nutrition. I think are a little saturated with the training side of things. There's a lot of people talking training out there, and that's great. I don't think there's as nearly as many people talking about nutrition, at least not in the way that I'm trying to, which is kind of bridging the gap between in the trenches experience and an academic background and anecdotal experience, working with lots of clients, walking the walk myself, and then putting a huge emphasis on the training side of things. I think a lot of the people talking about nutrition out there are pure bodybuilders. They're not really experienced in the sports performance side of things, or they're speaking to a very extreme niche crowd. Or it's kind of the pure academics who may have great information but may not be reaching the same folks who kind of want to see someone who's a little bit more in the middle, can kind of speak to all demographics. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do here.
Right. That's one of the most important pieces and components to being a coach is walking the walk. Right. I don't think you have to be a professional powerlifter or a bodybuilder or a marathon runner or any of that stuff in order to be an effective, high quality coach. But I think it definitely helps, right? Like when your athletes come in and they know that you've been disciplined, you are consistently working out, you're training, and you're dieting and you're doing all the things. It makes it easier to follow you and trust you. I've also seen the flip side of it where a lot of coaches rely too heavily on that being their identity and then leaving out the actual coaching X's and O's. So it is a double-sided sword there in some aspects, but it is really important to live it, I think, right? Have you found that it adds credibility as a coach when you're walking the walk?
100%. Yeah, that's something I preach all the time. I don't think coaches need to be elite strength athletes. I don't think you need to be the strongest guy in the world or the most jacked guy in the world. But I think if you're not walking the walk as a strength coach, as a nutritionist, I think you are disconnecting yourself from the subject matter. I think you are losing an edge creatively when it comes to exploring programming, exploring new protocols and approaches. I think you are losing an element of connection with your athletes, with your clients. I think you gain a lot of respect for them when they see you walking the walk, preaching, practicing what you preach and doing it at a high level. And then, with like the physique, the nutrition side of things, the advantage you kind of get is you instantly gain that from the athletes when you walk in the room because they can just see you. They see you immediately. They don't, if you're the coach who's walking the walk under the bar, the players absolutely respect that, but they might not always see it. But when you're really doing things right yourself with the nutrition and doing it at a high level, it's unignorable from the second the players look at you or your clients look at you.
I want to go back for a minute to what you mentioned a few minutes ago about over dieting, right? And when your playing career was over and you were done playing offensive line, you were over it, you're ready to transition to coaching and started that transition and started living a little bit different lifestyle when it came to like your nutrition and your training a little bit. Looking back, talk to us a little bit about that transition, like what maybe you would have done differently, carb cycling or the importance of carbs or some of those mistakes that you made during that transition.
Right. Patience is key and doing it slowly. one thing I'll preface with is, obviously my own personal example was trying to un-offensive lineman myself, which, when you're talking about actual offensive linemen, there are absolutely limits we want to put on how far you take a diet. I was trying to look like a bodybuilder. Whereas if I'm working with an offensive lineman who needs to lose body fat, of course, we're not going to be trying to diet 50 pounds off of him or have him looking pretty on the beach. We're just going to try to lose enough weight to where it actually improves his game, but it still allows him to be a big human on the field that's not getting pushed around. So, but anyway, to your question, it's dieting slowly and it's not aggressively chasing how quickly can I lose weight on the scale. And a big part of that is going to be some level of tracking your food. And unfortunately, this is where you tend to lose a lot of people, particularly young people, athletes. So finding a middle ground to where they can be doing some version of tracking, so we can stay on top of their actual intake and tweak it so they're not eating too little and they're not eating too much. I mean, you wouldn't put together a strength and conditioning program and just have them walk in the weight room and put random weights on the bar and expect them to.
Coach, I think you'd be surprised at how often that still happens.
Well, yeah, but not the best way to do it. Of course, if you want to get someone add 50 pounds to someone's squat, we better be monitoring the weights we're putting on the bar and the sets and the reps. And it's the same thing for nutrition. If you're just totally shooting in the dark with the calorie intake, with the portion sizes, you're not going to be able to reliably set yourself on a trajectory where you're kind of in the pocket of losing weight at an effective rate, but not too quickly. What happens when you over diet is you're essentially you're in too big of a calorie deficit. And at that point, you're starting to flirt with losing muscle tissue. You're starting to flirt with just tanking your energy. You're going to probably get an appetite rebound where you're having cravings, you're starving, which is going to make it a lot harder to adhere to the diet. And then you're putting yourself in an unsustainable place. If you're just dieting on calories that are just too low for you, well, what happens when the diet ends? We're going to have to, a lot of times that's where people then just regain all their body fat, is because they dieted too aggressively and then they get burnt out and then they just go right back to the way they're eating before the diet started, and then they just gain all their fat back. So I like to diet slowly and keep the calorie deficit moderate. And you mentioned the carb cycling. For an athlete, I like to use some version of carb cycling where the simplest way to do it is, split the diet up into, you got training days and you got non-training days. On your training days, calories are a bit higher, specifically carbohydrates. And then on your non-training days, calories are lower, also specifically carbohydrates. We're kind of getting the best of both worlds here because we're getting more fuel, more recovery resources on our higher energy output days when we're training. And then we're shifting things a little bit more into the putting fat loss more in the driver's seat on the non-training days. We don't need all that same fuel. So that's kind of an easy way to split it up. And the kind of happy medium tracking protocol I'll try to get guys to do. Best case scenario, they track literally every gram of food and they know every calorie is accounted for, but that's often not realistic with working with athletes. So what I'll have them do is take a food journal. Hey, journal your food for a week or at least 3 days. Write down everything that goes in your face for 3 days, when you ate it, what it was, and roughly how much of it was. And at any given point in time, most people are just maintaining their body weight, right? They're not actively losing or gaining weight. So this food journal is going to give us a pretty decent snapshot of what their maintenance calories look like. And then from there, we can make some adjustments to it. You want to lose weight? Okay, we can scale the calories down. You want to gain weight? We can scale the calories up. And then another thing I'll try to get guys doing is just eating a consistent number of meals daily. Like, let's get you eating 4 meals a day and eat that every day. It's not different on the weekends. It's not different on your off days. 4 meals a day, every day. And we're not even worried about, exactly how much food in each meal, but we're going to hit 4 meals a day. And this starts to really auto regulate your intake because if there's no consistency to your frequency of meals, you're going to be all over the place throughout the week. Some days the guys will be eating, 4 huge meals. Another day they'll sleep in till noon and they'll eat 2 meals on the day, and then their calorie intake is just all over the place. Whereas if it's 4 meals a day, eating them roughly around the same time, you're probably not going to be drastically overeating or undereating. It's going to be a lot more kind of standardized. And then from there, we can start filling in some of the specifics of the meal. Like, okay, let's build every meal around a protein source. Let's start low hanging fruit. Any protein source, nothing fried, no fatty barbecue meat, not bacon and sausage, but let's build it around something like chicken, lean beef, salmon, eggs, Greek yogurt, whey isolate. Every meal starts with a protein source. And then from there, okay, is it a training day? Well, let's have some more carbohydrates. And I like to go with foods that would fall into what I call the kill it, pick it, grow it category. If you can hunt it, fish it, and kill it, or you can grow it in the ground or pick it out of a tree, it's probably a very safe bet to include in your diet, and your risk of overeating is going to be extremely low. It's very hard to overeat yourself into a calorie surplus eating chicken breasts, rice, potatoes, berries, bananas, avocados, stuff like that. So on training days, let's go with some kill it, pick it, grow it carbohydrates. Add a little bit of fat to each meal. And then on your non-training days, let's scale those carbs back, have a little bit more of the fats. And let's food journal. Let's measure your body weight on a weekly basis. You're going down, or you losing 5 pounds in a week. All right, let's maybe bump your food up a bit. That's a bit too fast. Losing a pound or two a week, that's perfect. Let's keep things right here and let's stay consistent with it. So that was kind of a long-winded response, but it's never quite as simple as a 2 sentence answer.
Coach, you're very well published when it comes to podcasts, articles, and things like that, talking about the importance of carbohydrates and carb cycling. And this is something that I've taken from some of your talks and implemented and had some really good results. But if you were working with a team that trains in the morning, right? So obviously your timing and the amount of meals that you can get in that window are a lot smaller. How does that impact your decision-making process on what you tell them and the guidance you give them from a nutritional perspective?
Yeah, so if you're training early morning, I'll kind of shift the carb window a bit to where I'll try to get, 2 higher carb meals the day before and then have 2 higher carb meals the day of. So, if you're training at 6 a.m., your 2 final meals of the day before, those are going to be your high carb meals. And then your post-workout meal and the meal after that, the day of the training session, those are also going to be high carb meals. So we kind of got your 4 higher carb meals. We just kind of slid it to where half of it was the day before, half of it was the day of. So we've got that chunk of time kind of encapsulating the training window where we're putting those carbohydrates. So that's a way to do that. But yeah, the early morning training session, chances are the guys are not going to wake up and have the appetite or the time to get a good quality high carb meal down at 5 a.m. Now, I would like them to get something in their stomach, and that may simply be liquid carbohydrates and some amino acids. But yeah, we'll kind of carb load them the night before.
That's awesome. I ask you that question selfishly. We're a team that trains first block, so we start class at 8 o'clock. And a lot of our kids struggle to eat breakfast in the morning. We try to make some things available for them, so that way they're training on something rather than nothing. But still, it's hard, especially with high schoolers and even to an extent, I'd imagine college kids as they're coming in. If we have morning training, struggling to eat. What are some advice or what are some things when it comes to like what to make available for those athletes? What are some foods that would be quality to give to kids before training?
Yeah, man, for sure. And I mean, That's the same thing we were doing with our Division I college athletes. It's like we can't rely on these guys to eat a good dinner the night before. Most of them are rolling in. They just got out of bed 10 minutes ago. They haven't, nothing on their stomach. So yeah, we'd have out anything we could for them. And, unfortunately, if you're eating a whole food snack moments before you step on the weight room floor, it's not the best, because it's just, the carbohydrates you eat are only doing something for you insofar as they're actually in your bloodstream. If they're just sitting in your stomach while you're training, it's not really helping you. So, if a guy's going to eat a whole food meal before they train, I try to get them to do it at least a good 30 minutes beforehand. And if that's not going to work, let's get liquids in you. And that's a big underrated aspect to all this, is the hydration and electrolyte intake. And it's kind of a boring topic, and everybody kind of nods their heads. Yeah, I know I need to drink more. I need to be better with my electrolyte intake, but it is just as crucial, if not more, than the food. And it's not just a matter of, oh, I need to be hydrated and consume sodium so I don't cramp. The electrolytes are going to be critical players in muscle contraction and force production, in basically every cellular function of the body. So if you're dehydrated or your electrolyte intake is subpar, you've got a system that's not functioning at a high level internally. So even if a guy comes, like, I would rather have a guy come in really well hydrated with a lot of electrolytes in his system and no whole food. I would take that over a kid coming in dehydrated and eating, a whole food meal 5 minutes before the training session starts. So I think that's some of the lowest hanging fruit that most guys can do, is wake up and immediately it's fluids and electrolytes. And then we can also get some liquid carbs in as well.
If you've been in strength and conditioning for any amount of time, you've probably had some athletes come to those O linemen and D linemen talking about wanting to diet down, lose some weight, see some abs, get a little more definition for spring break and for summer and things like that. And that brings me to a really big question on the difference between dieting for performance and the difference between dieting for body composition. Is there a difference? Like, how do those two relate to each other? And kind of what advice would you give to athletes that might be on the O line or D line and might have to have a heavier or a less optimal body composition for aesthetics in order to perform in their sport? What would you tell them?
There's definitely common themes, but the way I would distinguish it is, I look at body comp nutrition as a little bit more of a math equation, and I look at performance nutrition as more of an art. When it comes to body composition, the primary focus has got to be the calories and the macros. That's why I call it more of a math equation. If we're trying to lose body fat, right, it's a calorie deficit. We're trying to gain, it's a calorie surplus, and we might play around with that, the periodization of it with a carb cycling protocol. But the macros and calories and manipulating them, monitoring them, and adjusting them over time, that's the biggest part of the battle. Whereas with performance, we're not necessarily trying to alter someone's body composition. Now, oftentimes, if we get them on a good performance diet, or I should say almost always, body composition is going to improve. But we're not necessarily prioritizing, like, we really just got to pull a bunch of fat off this guy, or we really got to build a bunch of muscle on this guy. We're not trying to change the scale. What we're trying to do is just optimize force production and reduce inflammation in the body, optimize digestion, have stable blood glucose levels, have them feeling good, and have them their output is at its highest level, their recovery is at its highest level. So I will put a much bigger emphasis on micronutrient intake, the food quality, the food selections themselves, hydration, electrolyte intake. These are going to be the biggest needle movers for performance. And we don't have to get as deep into the weeds with the macros and the calories. So yeah, body comp focus, it's like we are food journaling, we are tracking, we are adjusting calories and macros, but you want to do this to the best of our ability, we're also going to be focusing on the micronutrient intake and the electrolyte, hydration, all that. Then for performance, it's like, okay, we don't need to track every gram of your food, but we're going to be damn sure that the foods you're consuming are high quality and covering all of our bases from a micronutrient standpoint.
So far, you've talked a lot about electrolytes, micronutrients. I think we hear a lot about macronutrients, but what are some of those micronutrients that are really key to performance, and how can we help our athletes, whether it's what we're eating, when we're eating it, how can we help our athletes get more of those?
Man, I would say the most underconsumed three are going to be potassium, calcium, magnesium. That falls into the electrolyte category, and we can get a lot of these things from foods. Fiber is also going to be another big one. But potassium, I think, is highly, highly underrated. Whenever people think about electrolyte intake, it's almost always sodium. Like almost every electrolyte supplement is very, very sodium biased and low in potassium. Um, and most guys are just under consuming the potassium. So things like spinach, potatoes, lean meat, egg whites, Greek yogurt, fruits, fruit juices. These are all going to be very rich in potassium. And then we can also bring in some targeted potassium supplementation, with like a potassium citrate powder. Coconut water is also one of my absolute favorite potassium sources. Calcium, I think dairy is highly underrated. I think dairy at times has gotten, it's like hyped up for kids, but then it kind of gets this bad rap with adults because suddenly everyone's got a dairy intolerance. But I think if you're consuming quality dairy sources, it's a game changer for calcium and for gut health. Calcium's a huge player in muscle contraction. Um, so I think low fat milk, low fat Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, kefir, things like this are going to be really really good additions. And then magnesium. Now I'll admit magnesium is pretty tough to really hit your intake from whole foods alone. So I'll usually go with magnesium supplementation via magnesium glycinate, which is actually going to really help with sleep. But it's also just a crucial electrolyte here. And if you're lacking in one, like I mentioned earlier, the system is not functioning optimally. And then fiber. I think almost everyone is under consuming fiber. And that's going to be a really big player in improving body composition and a number of other health metrics. So, with fiber, it's going to be, there's a lot of sources we can get it from: oatmeal, fruits, vegetables, ground flaxseed, whole grain cereals, things like that. So yeah, that's a decent list of several things that tend to go underconsumed.
So still talking performance, but I want to pivot just a little bit. We've put in the work throughout all week long. We're in season, put in the work all week long, and we're finally to game day, right? I think I hate how much time there is between our pregame meal and kickoff. So we kick off at like 7:30, 8 o'clock. We're usually eating pregame meal around 4:30, 5 o'clock at the latest, depending on busing and all those things, and home game, away game, all those things. But we're in the process of finalizing our pregame meal structure for next year and the framework that we're trying to use when it comes to like what we're eating pregame. So if you're designing a framework for pregame meals, like what do you like? What do you like your athletes to eat? And what are some common foods and structures on how you think through those things?
Yeah, it's always bugged me a little bit how much time there is between that pre-workout or the pre-game meal and then kickoff. Now that's kind of comes down to just the logistics of game day, but that is a long time to go without eating. So we'll get into kind of the pregame snacks in a second. But for the pregame meal, I like a big carby meal, and that can be something like pasta, that can be rice, potatoes, hell, it could be pancakes. I would just go with a good high carb meal. I'd keep we don't really need to worry about a ton of protein. We can keep the protein pretty low. At that point, protein's just going to be taking up stomach space and harder on the appetite. So I'll have a little bit of a lean protein, a little bit of chicken, a little bit of beef, something like that. Maybe even something just like a Greek yogurt or some whey isolate. But I want carbs to be the star of the show. I don't want them just to be. I don't want them to be sugary carbs at this point. We'll save the sugars for closer to game day, or excuse me, closer to game time. But yeah, like I would go for a big pasta meal. Don't load it with meat sauce or like a white cream sauce, but just a big plate of pasta with some marinara sauce and maybe some bread on the side. Can't go wrong with that. Or a little bit of lean meat, some rice, potatoes, throw some fruit in there. I think that'd be great. Now, you don't want to eat to digestive discomfort, of course, but um, when guys get the game day, anxious on game day and then they don't eat, I think or they barely eat, I think that's setting them behind the eight ball a little bit. So try to get a good substantial meal in there. And then about 30 minutes before kickoff, try to get in some more sugary carbs. So that could be banana. That could be some liquid carbs, Gatorade, fruit juice, something like that. Hell, I mean, it could be some Welch's fruit snacks. Um, Now, sometimes you'll see like guys eating Uncrustables or PB&Js. I try to avoid like peanut butter and fats around then. At that point, I just want some simple carbohydrates. Maybe I have half a bagel with some honey, some rice cakes with honey. Things like that would be great. And then I'd also just have some carbohydrates during the game, and that might be at halftime. It might be a little bit between drives. I'm a big proponent of intra workout nutrition, and that can be applied to game day as well. Just some keeping a flow of some easy digesting sugary carbs in small amounts.
In the high school setting, something that we run into quite frequently is that athletes want to do their best. They want to do better at nutrition, and a lot of times they even know what to do or what looks better than what doesn't. But we run into a lot that they're not the ones doing the shopping. Their parents are, or the cafeteria is making the options for lunch or breakfast. So a lot of times they're not fully in control of those. So I've lived under that old adage that something is better than nothing, especially for those athletes that are trying to gain weight. But this is, it's kind of compounded by class schedules when you're going from you have breakfast, then we have weight training, you lift, we try to give you a snack right after, but then you're going to class, you have lunch, and then you go sit in two or three more classes before we have practice, and then you're supposed to be able to optimally perform at practice before you go home for dinner. And oftentimes, I always suggest things like peanut butter and jellies to our kids, especially those trying to gain weight. But what are some other options, or what are some things, some helpful tips when it comes to having readily available foods that are going to fuel you for practice when it comes to those times?
Yeah, and I'm not really against the PB and J's and things like that for high schoolers. I mean, listen, we got to find a happy medium of what's actually going to be realistic for these kids, and it'd be great if they were eating a Tupperware of cold chicken and rice, but that's not happening. Um, when it comes to working with these athletes, something that I realized quickly was like, uh, quote unquote, optimal nutrition is not going to be a thing. We need to find out what realistic nutrition is for them. And for young athletes, a lot of the time, I'd rather just have them eating something rather than nothing, even if that something is not, the perfect meal. So, yeah, man, if you can bring in a PB&J with you, a banana, great. Other snacks. Hey, a little thing of beef jerky. If you can bring in, a deli turkey sandwich. Although I guess that would require, keeping it cold. But something you could eat cold that still tastes good. Nuts, fruit are always going to be easy. Um, granola bars, things like that. Like there's no cutting edge food selections or meals I'm going to give here. My biggest honest advice would be just eat something, right? And just kind of establish that consistent routine. Like, okay, you've got your breakfast at home or breakfast at school. you've got your school lunch, and then you've got a snack built in somewhere, and you hit that snack daily around the same time. Um, do they get for your kids? Is it two meals served at school? Is it like breakfast and then lunch, and then anything else would be on their own?
Yeah, we try to give them something after our workouts too, but yeah, breakfast and lunch.
What time are they eating lunch, and then what time is practice?
Lunch is around 11 o'clock for most of them, and then practice is at 4.
Yeah, so I'd prioritize bringing that snack or small meal somewhere to put about an hour before practice started. That's where I would really make sure that these kids came prepared. So they have their breakfast, whether that's at home or school, little post-workout snack, lunch, 11:30 noon, and then I'd be eating on their own an hour to an hour and a half before practice started. And um, I mean, just all the things we mentioned: PB&J, bagel, deli turkey, beef jerky, rice cakes, fruit, nuts, anything. Just get in a decent little meal so you actually have some pre-practice fuel.
We've talked a lot about different tips for gaining weight, for pregame nutrition, and things like that, and some general nutrition tips. If you were speaking to specifically to a high school client, or you were coaching a high school team yourself, what would be your biggest priority when working with high school aged athletes when it comes to their nutrition?
I think the biggest win for high school kids like this, it's not going to be the perfect meal plan. It's just going to be being really consistent with just getting those meals and snacks in and making that a non-negotiable part of the routine. Like if I can have a high school kid that said, yeah, I made it a big priority every single day. I had breakfast, had a post-workout snack. I ate a good lunch served at school, and I always brought a snack or small meal with me to have before practice. And then I took advantage to whatever was being served post-practice, or went home and had a big meal with the family. And I was really consistent with that without even hearing what they were eating. I think that would be a huge win, because most of these kids, the narrative with them is they're just not eating. Like they're barely eating anything, or they're going 6 hours throughout the day without having anything on their stomach. Um, so I would just focus on that low hanging fruit, and let's avoid like the common sense crap. Like, let's not build this diet out of the obvious fast food, fried foods, pizza, and things like that. But I wouldn't get lost in the weeds of perfect foods, perfect meals, macros, anything like that for these kids. I would just be, let's build some good, consistent habits about getting food in, and just making that a part of your day that becomes a daily routine and non-negotiable.
Coach, we've already mentioned a few times you do some private coaching. You've got a lot of podcast information out, your own podcast, the Hammer and Chisel Performance Podcast. But if any of our listeners are finding value in what you're giving and they want to learn some more about you, or more about your products, where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, man, I would check out my YouTube channel. The YouTube handle's Hammer and Chisel Performance, but if you just search John Heck Nutrition or something like that, you'll find my channel. I'm active on Instagram. I've got my podcast, the Hammer and Chisel Performance Podcast, which episodes are available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. And then you can go to my website, where I've got my one-on-one coaching services, a diet ebook, my training programs, and some other resources there.
Well, Coach, I appreciate you for taking the time to jump on. I know you're navigating a busy schedule and running your own coaching business and all the things that come along with that. So appreciate you for taking the time and jumping on with us to talk a little bit today.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for jumping on and listening in. We'll see you next time on the staff meeting.